Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, a BGP hack reroutes traffic around Amazon, banks, and many others. We'll explain how this can happen and why we don't see it more often. Then we'll have an interview with Brendan Gregg, the author of a new book that focuses on system performance in the enterprise and the cloud. And a big batch of your questions, our answers, and much, much more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi, everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 121 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly systems network and administration podcast. We stream this episode live on August 1st, 2013. This episode is brought to you by GoDaddy.com and by UnitySync from Directory Wizards. I'll tell you more about both of those as the show goes on. And the live stream is powered by ScaleEngine over at ScaleEngine.com. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan. What?
And the steak.
Yeah, right. And the Canadian.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Hey, Alan, I'm excited because, well, first of all, we've been screwing around on the live stream for about an hour. It's like our latest start ever, but we're doing a doubleheader session. This is the beginning of a doubleheader. This is where we're awake. We've got our energy.
Behind, so I mostly spent the time writing.
Right, and I ate some ham sandwich. That was good. But why are we shooting 2 episodes today? What's going on, Alan? What are you up to?
Because I'm going to be away next weekend. Or next week. So.
I was trying to get you to say where. I was like,
I'm going to Las Vegas for the Star Trek convention.
Which is awesome. And you're meeting up with people, I assume.
Yes, lots of Jupiter Force people.
That's going to be good. I really wish I was going to that. I think that's going to be a good con to go to. And, you know, as some of the actors get a little older, there's not going to be a lot more opportunities to go to these events.
That too.
So you're making the trip down. I wish you could stop by Seattle on your way down, though. That'd be fun.
That would be the opposite of on the way.
Right,
yes.
Right. Well, you take the scenic route where you go completely out of your way.
Go to completely the opposite side of the country and then back to the middle.
All right, well, we got a big show today. Tons of emails. We've been saving them up. This week, we got a bunch. And then next week, we got a bunch. Plus, we got an interview coming up later on in this episode from the floor of a convention, right?
Yes, from OzCon.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, OzCon just wrapped up. But first, why don't we get to the news? This first story is one of these where it sounds like it's something from the Hackers movie where a bank's internet traffic gets rerouted by compromising the routers from these shady internet cafe kind of thing. What's going on with the story, Alan? Right. Tell me what's really going on.
So on July 24th, which was last week, a BGP hijack took place. And basically what happened was a number of specific IP addresses were maliciously routed to an ISP in the Netherlands instead of to their original, where they're supposed to go.
Wow.
So what was especially unusual about it was that most routes that are broadcast over BGP to the internet are at least /24, which is 256 IP addresses or more, just because otherwise the routing tables would get huge if everybody's advertising, right? Well, this one IP is over here and this other IP right beside it is actually on the opposite side of the world.
Oh, it'd be a mess.
Right, and especially a couple of years ago when routers, it costs a lot of money to have enough RAM in your router to hold the routing table.
Still does, actually, for some reason.
Yeah. So the space there is kind of limited. So you summarize the networks as much as you can, right, to keep as few different routes as possible. And so generally, as a rule, you don't announce a prefix that's smaller than a /24.
Okay.
Well, in this case, there were a lot of specific /32s. And a bunch of 27s and 29s, and basically a bunch of these really small address ranges being announced into this, and all the traffic routed to this ISP in the Netherlands. What was really interesting about it was whose traffic was being hijacked. I have a short list of just some of the places here. Is Amazon.com, JP Morgan Chase, Branch Banking and Trust Company, Bank of America, Société Française de Radio Téléphone, which is a French bank.
Oh, that sounded good,
First
Alan.
Bank, HSBC Hong Kong, the Principal Finance Group, PNC Bank, Regionals Financial Corporation, and so on. So a bunch of different banks basically had their range of IP addresses where their web servers are routed to the Netherlands. So the way BGP works is you announce the IP range at the places where you can get to it. So normally that'd be one place where the server physically is, right? And you would announce it, and then your ISP announces it to their peers, and it keeps going across the internet, and eventually everybody knows how to get to you. But you can do this thing called Anycast, where you could announce it from 2 different places. right? And then the people that are closer to each place send their traffic there. So in this case, if you were in the Netherlands and were closer to this ISP than you were to the bank, then
the shorter route wins.
To the ISP in the Netherlands instead of to the bank.
Yep.
So especially if you target foreign banks, you would get all the people in the Netherlands that were trying to go to a foreign bank.
Right.
So the ISP in question here is called NedZone. They're fairly small, and normally they announce about 30 different IP ranges, varying in size between, their biggest one is a /18, and then they have mostly 20s and 21s and a couple 24s. But on the date in question, all of a sudden they were announcing 369 different prefixes, most of them being unusually small.
Yikes.
This is most likely caused by a malicious customer there rather than NedZone themselves or an employee trying to do this. So it's kind of unfortunate for them, but that's why normally an ISP, before they'll accept routes from you, they require what's called a letter of authorization. So if you're going to announce this set of IP addresses, you have to prove to them that either you own those IP addresses or you have the permission of the person who does to announce a route on them. But apparently that didn't take place in this case. But most likely this attack was an attempt to run a man-in-the-middle attack against online banking. Right? All the people who were trying to get to these banks would connect to this machine that was set up and announcing these routes, and then it would either proxy you to the actual bank and just listen in the middle, or just run a phishing site. The difference here being that if you go to the actual URL, you would get the phishing site. Now, the phishing site wouldn't have the real SSL certificate, but if it can trick your browser into not thinking that there's going to be SSL, then problem solved.
Right.
And unless people are using HSTS, where your bank's website has told you it will always have SSL, your browser won't notice that you just connected not over SSL. And if you don't look for the lock icon in your browser, which a lot of people can easily mistake if the site says it's favicon to a lock, they see a lock in the URL bar and they think they're okay.
Well, and honestly, I think people, after they visit a site a few times, don't ever think to look for it anymore. Especially not, your more average user.
Exactly. I admit that I wouldn't always check. My bookmarks go to HTTPS directly, but still.
Yeah, I don't know if I would notice or not, to be honest.
Exactly.
And if I did notice, I'd probably just think, the website's having some technical issues, but I need what I want, so I'll just log in.
Well, no, I would never do my banking not over
Not
SSL.
Banking. No, I was thinking Gmail or something. Like if I got to a Gmail page, I'm dumb enough where if it wasn't encrypted, I might still log in. And I'd regret it.
Yep. So I have a couple links to different Looking Glass sites. The ripe.net has one here that shows all the prefixes they did announce, like the 300 and some odd. And then because the right page shows everything they've done in the last 30 days, and then they're different colors depending on whether it's still active or not. And then the Hurricane Electric Looking Glass shows what it is right now, which is useful to see what it normally looks like. But both of those are interesting, and
Geeky
if you look around there, you can also type in your own IP address and see how your ISP is peered with the internet.
Oh, cool!
It's always fun to investigate things like that.
We'll have a link to that in the show notes. You guys can go play. I like that.
Someone in the chat room says Favicon-256 is a really bad cryptography system.
So this was a failure at the ISP over controls, maybe? It seems like a rogue employee.
BGP is kind of based on this open trust model.
Yeah.
In some places put restrictions in, but generally the restrictions are all based on standard practices and just...
I don't understand how this hasn't happened before then, because to me, BGP
Well, it has. Like, we've seen when...
Well, I guess so, yeah.
When Pakistan tried to block YouTube inside Pakistan, they accidentally announced the route out and caused it to break for everybody who was closer to Pakistan than to YouTube.
Does that not... I mean, think about how little issues we do have.
Yes, well, because
it just takes one ISP to screw it up.
Who run BGP know what they're doing.
Yeah, it's just amazing. I mean, it's just...
And there's kind of this peer pressure thing is if you screw up everybody else's network, they're going to be very upset with you.
That's true. There is some repercussion there, isn't there? Yeah. They will find you.
And eventually, when this does happen, remember, it's only if the bad route is more optimal, which usually isn't necessary.
Usually not the case. Yeah.
But yeah, at some point, if somebody kept doing this, then the people that connect them to the internet would be like, sorry, we're not going to listen to you anymore.
I bet, it's two things. One is it probably happens more often than we realize, and it's just the internet routes around it. And,
but maybe a little bit.
And I bet you the other reason why we don't notice it a ton is because, like you just said, it has to be a superior route, and probably in most cases it's not.
Yeah, so, if North Korea throws up a bunch of routes for whitehouse.gov, unless you're in North Korea, that's not going to be the better route to get there.
Right. So cool. It's so cool the way it works. All right, well, good spot to take a little break.
Yep.
All right, well, I want to thank our sponsor this week, GoDaddy.com, and I got a great news for you guys. I've got the 249 code extended, and now, if you use the link in our show notes, you'll get to experience something brand new from GoDaddy. That's the Express Pathway. And you'll know you're at our specific Express Pathway because, bam, there's Danica. And what's great about this is a new streamlined way for you to make your purchases from GoDaddy.com. Click, purchase done. Super quick. GoDaddy knows that you guys are technical, and you know what you want. You know what products you want. And if you don't need to have everything just sort of brought up to you in a big menu. You go in, precision strike, and you're out like a freaking .com ninja. How about that? They're enabling your .com ninja-ness. Use the code TECH249 when you check out, and you get the .com for $2.49. That's less than you're paying for some of your apps, and you know it. You know it. Make your life easier. You got a crazy URL to some website. You got a crazy social media. Okay, freaking Google Plus, right? Let's talk about their URLs for a second.
What's with that?
I know. Come on, Google. Figure it out, right? Gosh, I want google.com/Chris Fisher Google, by the way. Just saying. But until then, well, you've got other options, just like I've done and just like many other people have done, and you can get it for $2.49 and then just have it redirect to your Google Plus profile page. Although, maybe you don't want a .com. Maybe you want some hosting. Maybe you want something fancy. You want some WordPress up on a shared host. Maybe you want some certs. Maybe you want something else. Use the code GO32OFF3. You'll save 32% off the entire order. Just check out that link we'll have in our show notes. And when you're there, right there, boom, look at this. Domain names, email, web hosting, web builder. You just click which one you want, click, done. Go check out the new Express Pathway. It's now even faster to get a .com from GoDaddy. And thanks to GoDaddy for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. We really appreciate it. And keep up the great work, guys. Love the new Express checkout system. That's really neat.
Yep, it is. And just being able to register your domain that much faster, it's great for power users, which is what the TechSNAP audience is, right?
Yeah. All right, Alan, I think it's time we talk about Droplets of Doom.
Droplets of Doom, sure.
Tell me about this.
Yeah. So DigitalOcean, which is a cloud provider, they're kind of popular. They call their clouds droplets because they're, a cloud is made up of droplets of water. But they were found that some of their virtual machine images that they build with the snapshots and stuff would end up reusing the same SSH private keys. Right? So when you spin up based on an image, if that image has an SSH key in it, when OpenSSH starts, it doesn't generate a new SSH key, right? Which is what you would expect. And so while Joshua Lund, who is the guy that discovered this, was using DigitalOcean's cloud to write a comparison between Ansible and Salt, which are two different administration and orchestration tools. They're like Puppet, just different. And he was creating and destroying all of these VMs to play with it. And a couple of times he ended up getting the same IP address on a new VM, which is pretty normal. But what he noticed is when he logged into a different VM that had the same IP, he didn't get the SSH warning he expected. Right? Normally, SSH would be,
just hey, different host.
The private key has changed. The machine you're connecting to isn't the same as the one that was at this IP address earlier, which likely means that either the machine has been reformatted or somebody is pretending to be the machine you're trying to connect to.
Right.
Right? And, OpenSSH will just completely refuse to connect until you manually remove the cached key or something.
Yep.
And so he investigated further and found that, yes, even ones with different IPs, so lots of different machines he had all had the same key. And so he reported it to DigitalOcean, and they started resolving the issue. But yeah, basically it seems when they snapshotted the image, they forgot to erase the SSH key first, and so when it rebooted, it didn't generate a new one. So it meant every droplet based off that image would have the same key, which technically doesn't hurt anything right away. but it can allow for a man-in-the-middle attack, right?
Sure.
It means that if someone could replace your droplet, or you killed off a droplet and then somebody started one and got the same IP address, if you were one of your old users connected to that old IP address, you wouldn't get the warning. You would get the prompt, and you would send your login and password. And now the person who owned the droplet now could get your username and password. Right? If they set up a custom SSHD that logged the password on every attempt, they would now know your username and password. And if you used it as an SSH tunnel, they could see all your traffic that you were doing, everything you put over the tunnel. So it's kind of a big issue, but not at the same time. It's weird. So most likely this is just a simple oversight, although there's also the possibility that they did it on purpose so that when the droplets first boot up, they take a bunch of time to generate enough randomness to build the SSH private key, right? And one of DigitalOcean's selling points is, your droplets up in less than 60 seconds or whatever, right? So they might have done that to speed it up.
Yeah. Just cause,
although I don't know that.
Probably not. But maybe they figured to shave a few.
But if it's a common thing people do when they're building Amazon images and then sharing them publicly is if you forget to remove your SSH keys, more importantly, if you forget to remove the private key you generate on it for a username, then other people could have your private key and log into your other machines if you've allowed that key other places, right? But in general, it's something that people often forget when you're building an image you're going to use and stamp it out on a lot of machines.
Right. Especially, it's, you and I've talked about this before. I've made mistakes when I've published a virtual machine before for the audience to download. You just don't think about it.
I had one where VirtualBox remembered, because it had the shared clipboard, whatever had been on my clipboard in Windows.
Gets in the virtual machine clipboard.
Was in the virtual machine even after it was powered down, saved, exported, and published to the website. Somehow it still remembered my clipboard. It's not like I suspended it.
For me, it was nothing embarrassing. It was like websites, the web history, right?
Mine. Oh yeah. Mine
and my command lines.
Long string, and I forget what it was. It wasn't anything that important, but it was enough that people were like, "What's this?" And I recognized it. And I was like, "How did you get that?"
Like that could have been a lot worse. That could have been a lot worse. Right.
Yes.
Imagine too, like if that brief moment in time when LastPass and KeePass have your password in the clipboard, if the VirtualBox machine grabbed it just at that point when you were shutting it down, and then you never knew because you don't really think about the fact that sits in your clipboard for a few moments. It's a funny situation. Well, there you go.
So the issue was reported to DigitalOcean, and they responded immediately the same day.
Oh, good.
Although the next day they found there was an issue where they had fixed some of the images, but not all of them.
Yeah.
But eventually, within 7 days, they had fixed all the images.
Okay.
And then they started working with their customers who had duplicate keys to regenerate them. And then 6 weeks after the initial report, they had a public advisory on their website.
Okay. Okay. All right. I mean, 6 weeks. Okay.
Well, that was after when they finally announced it all publicly.
Yeah. Yeah, after they had it all taken care of.
All the customers had enough time to fix their keys before they tell people, hey, you might be able to do a man-in-the-middle attack.
Right. That makes sense. That does make sense.
And then a little note for me is just, if you don't install the OS yourself, right, if you don't see the SSH key getting generated on the first boot, you might consider just regenerating the key.
Why not?
Right? Like oftentimes when you rent a server, like a physical server or a virtual one, the first thing you do when you log in, regenerate the key and reconnect, and then the key is good.
Very good.
It only takes a couple seconds.
You guys want to read more about that?
I have a link to the official advisory. And then on some future episode of TechSNAP, we'll talk about SSHFP DNS records. So putting the fingerprint that a server is supposed to have in DNS, so your client can actually look it up, and instead of getting that warning the very first time you connect to a machine, it'll use from the DNS record for that host name, it'll know what the key should be. Right? Because if a man-in-the-middle attack starts before the first time you connect to an SSH server, you won't have a key to compare to to tell that the key has changed. Right? So by publishing them in DNS, that solves the problem. And then, yesterday, I finished my first setup of Puppet database. PuppetDB is an add-on to Puppet, and it lets you store information. And what that allows me to do now is every one of my machines that has a Puppet agent on it sends its SSH key into the database, and then pulls from the database the SSH key or fingerprint of every single machine and puts it in a system-wide known host file.
Wow.
So now every one of my machines knows what the key should be for every other one of my machines.
That is so cool.
Yes.
That's a great system.
Yeah.
Oh,
and I'm going to extend it. Then I'm going to extend it so that it writes my Nagios configs for me.
Oh my gosh, that is so cool. That definitely is a topic for a future show. That is really cool.
But yeah, I've been putting the SSH FP records in DNS for 2 or 3 years now. The annoying part is the Windows DNS resolver library doesn't do that record type. It's very limited, so it doesn't work in PuTTY on Windows. But it works in OpenSSH on all your real.
Oh, I was going to say, but then I thought I wouldn't be inflammatory, and then you said it for me, so that was good. Nothing. All right, so
I mean everything that's not Windows.
We have a little interview with Brendan Gregg, who is the author of System Performance, Enterprise, and the Cloud, which really actually focuses more on Linux, doesn't it, Alan?
Yeah, so basically, most of the tools are focused on Linux, but mostly it's about the methodology and the mentality of figuring out why your system is slow or how to get more performance out of your system, right? How to make your database do more transactions per second, how to make your file system respond with less latency, and things like that.
And we should say a lot of these tools would apply to BSDs as well. The interview was conducted...
Yes, Brendan Gregg is a famous Sun developer, right? So he mostly did Solaris stuff.
Right. We didn't conduct the interview ourselves because neither Alan and I went to OSCon, but our chief Portland Bureau, what did we decide to say?
Yes, our Portland Bureau chief, Michael Dexter.
Portland Bureau Chief Michael Dexter conducted this interview with Brendan Gregg about his new book, and we're going to play a little bit of it here for you guys on the TechSNAP program.
Today I'm talking to Brendan Gregg about his new book, Systems Performance, which is expected in October of 2013. What's this book about?
So this book is about analyzing the performance of the operating system and analyzing the performance of applications from the operating system. So systems performance, you might think of it as the analysis using tools like VMstat, IOstat, MPstat, going into the command line. That's how we used to historically do it. Nowadays, the world is different. We've got cloud computing, there's lots of monitoring agents, and there's also dynamic tracing. And so systems performance is really interesting and really useful. People tend to steer clear from the operating system kernel a bit, thinking that the issues are always in the application because that's what you're developing. And I think there's some type of philosophy here about thinking that what you understand is where you can see the bugs. And if you're not a kernel engineer, you might have the assumption that why do I need to go into the kernel and why do I need to worry about systems performance? So as it turns out, the kernel is software has bugs, lots of things change, new device drivers are added, and there's really a few types of problems that systems performance helps you solve. It helps you solve tuning in the kernel, and so you may get 5 to 10% wins. It helps you solve latency outliers, and they can happen because of device drivers, kernel scheduling, throttles, all sorts of things, bugs. And it also does give you the big, massive wins in the application because I am using the operating system tools to inspect application performance. So there's many reasons why you do this, and that's the field of systems performance. It's really exciting, and this is also what I do as a job all the time.
I trust that dtrace will play a role in this. Can you give some examples of other monitoring agents that people might see on the LAN or the cloud, and how might dtrace differ from those?
Yeah, so I do use dtrace as an example of dynamic tracing in this book. This book, however, is aimed at a wide audience, and dynamic tracing gets into the source code and goes very deep. And so that's only used occasionally where necessary. This is more about basic things. How does it differ from, say, tracing on the LAN or other tracing that you might have seen? With dtrace, I can trace anything, so I'm not restricted to just the network packets and the information within network packets. Dtrace is also lightweight, so it's designed to be safe for production use and also low overhead. And I can do things like dtrace TCP packet retransmits in a very low overhead way and do that 24/7 by 365 in a way that I kind of hesitate to leave TCP dump running all the time just because of the overhead cost and the burden.
So what tools, in addition to dtrace, are covered?
All of the standard system administration tools, so things like top for Linux and PRStat, VMstats and IOstats. There's many tools. What I try and what's new in the book and what I try and lead with isn't so much the tools, although I do cover them, and like I love tools. I co-authored an earlier book about performance tools, so like I love the topic. But what hadn't been documented very well in our industry is performance methodologies. And so when people are faced with a performance issue, they wonder, where do I start? Like, I can run VMstat, but the customer's telling me I've got this performance issue. How do I connect the output with the issue I'm supposed to solve? So what's new in this book is I document all of the performance methodologies that experts in our industry use. And I think I didn't count them, I think that I must have hit over 30 methodologies. And I've categorized them for approaching different classes of problems. And that's really great because these methodologies, many of them are enumerated, they're like checklists, and they will give beginners a starting point. They'll give casual users or experts a reminder or a checklist so you can go through and make sure you didn't miss any areas of performance.
So I understand this is primarily in-base tools, not additional third-party daemons or anything?
Right. So this is not about any. I mention commercial products when they've contributed something really interesting to the field of systems performance, but the focus of the book is what you get with the operating system and just the standard open source tools that you can use to debug performance.
What operating systems are covered?
The primary operating system is Linux, and as a secondary operating system, I did the Solaris-based SmartOS, and it was a lot of work for me because I have to go through internals of 2 operating systems throughout the book. But it's really useful for the reader if you only care about Linux or if you only care about SmartOS or Solaris-based operating systems. This gives you perspective so that you can understand the design choices of your operating system and how things differ.
And who is it aimed at?
This is really aimed at a wide audience. My previous book on dtrace was over 1,000 pages, and that gets really deep. This one, I'm aimed at all system administrators, developers, web administrators, database administrators, just everyone, especially people for whom performance is not your day job, but you need to sometimes have a reference to get started and solve a ticket or to approach a performance problem. So people for whom performance is a casual activity.
So where can one follow you and follow the progress of the book so they can be first in line to either grab an early release or otherwise?
So I should be announcing it on I've got a blog on dtrace.org/blogs/Brendan, also on Twitter at Brendan Gregg, and it's a Prentice-Hall book, and as you said earlier, it should be out October 2013.
Any final thoughts?
No, I really enjoyed writing. It took a long time, and I hope it helps people solve performance issues in the real world.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was a great chat. I thought that was pretty interesting. I mean, he seems to be very passionate on the topic too, Alan.
Yes.
Well, very good. So, and we'll have another interview next week on the TechSNAP program from Oscar.
About dtrace, which was the tool he was talking a little bit about.
dtrace is legendary, actually. I remember hearing about dtrace very early on. All right. Well, very good. Thanks to to Michael Dexter, our Portland bureau chief, who sent that in from OSCON. Oh, Alan, this would be a great spot to stop and thank our second sponsor this week, who I am thrilled to have on. I started talking to Directory Wizards couple of months ago, because when I found out about what UnitySync can do, I felt like I had my caveman moment. I'll give you an example. Like, you ever think about, like, if you bring somebody forward in time, how they'd be amazed? Imagine, like, here I am, I'm a caveman, I have this log, I put it in the microwave, and all of a sudden this microwave turns it into instant food. That's how I felt about UnitySync. It's really incredible technology. Go check out durwiz.com and click on UnitySync. Here's what it lets you do. You can move different things between different directories. And initially that sounds pretty simple, but then when you think about how powerful this, imagine a scenario where you have an Active Directory and you want to sync that Active Directory to an open LDAP directory. Or maybe you have Active Directory and you have eDirectory. You have multiple different directories, you want to move information between the two. On the pre-show, Alan and I were sort of curmudgeoning about how when you're in IT, you often get in this spot where you have to change names, and when people have multiple name changes or move departments a lot, you depend on the situation where maybe HR finds out about that name change, or HR finds out about that phone number change, and then they put a ticket into IT, and and then IT has to update the directory. And of course, HR never informs you. HR never warns you. And then the directory gets out of date and people do searches and it's a mismatch. Well, now imagine this. Imagine a piece of software that could sit between these two directories. Maybe one that watches the HR database and says, oh, I've noticed a change in this particular field. Let me grab that change and move it over to your Active Directory. That way your Active Directory is always up to date and completely automatic. And you can use templating around this too, so that way you make sure the data matches up and it works the way you want it. It fits in the directory as you expect. I love the idea of sort of solving this whole problem. And you can throw Unity Sync on a Linux box or a Windows box. You can have a Linux box synchronizing between two Windows machines, or from a Linux box to a Windows machine. Cats and dogs playing together. Unity Sync takes your two desperate or multiple desperate data islands and brings them together. And one of the things that's really nice about Unity Sync is it's not a per user charge or anything like that. It's just a per directory charge. So you can start with an average size directory, and as time goes on, if that directory gets larger and larger with more and more information, you're not going to have all of a sudden a bunch of charges come up because that directory is grown. It's just per directory charge. It's very simple, and it's very, very powerful. In fact, if you want to get an idea of how powerful Directory Wizard is, or I'm sorry, Unity Sync is from Directory Wizards, go over to durwiz.com/download. Go over there, choose Unity Sync, put in your email address, put in your phone number, say you heard it on a podcast, put in the code TECH, and you'll get a 30-day free trial. 30-day free trials let you try kick around, see what you can do with it, and if you decide to keep it, you'll get a year of maintenance thrown in. So you decide you like it, you see it works the way I'm talking about, then you'll be taken care of for a year. It's a really, really, really great deal. I tell you, Alan, if I had this, say 5 years ago, if I had this, this would have solved me so much trouble. I really love the fact too that's only about 5 megabytes. It's 5 megabytes, and it's totally enterprise grade software. It's rocking.
I'm just thinking of a problem it would have solved for me too.
Yeah.
When I was building the cafe software and I built that really hacky Windows NT4 domain, it's like I could have done a real Active Directory domain and just have it synced from the LDAP of the website.
Right, and
or MySQL of the website and skip LDAP altogether.
Right. So I had an HR department that had a web app that they would update a MySQL database. And in that MySQL database, there'd be tables for the phone numbers, the department, and the last name. And they would go into their web application and they would change it in there, but that data would just live in there and they would refer to it. And, that was great for them, right? But the rest of the company could never benefit from that.
Yep.
Or, what else is another common scenario that I ran into all the time as a contractor is I would walk into a company that has merged with another company, and they have maybe multiple domains, and they need to have some commonality between those domains, but for a multiple of different reasons, they haven't actually joined the two domains yet.
Yes, or because you had the different versions, and one was upgraded and one wasn't, and the mixed mode was always nasty.
Or like or you've built an application that expects your domain name to be a certain name, and there's so many reasons. And in these situations, you still want to have some common administration accounts. You want to have common information synced between the two domains, but you can't necessarily join them. You could use something like Unity Sync to bring those two things, to bring like the administrator accounts, or bring the names between those two, because you can go in and just get just the information you want. You can get the entire directory or just the bits of information you want. It's completely powerful. It even has, if you really want to get under the hood, a Perl scripting language or a scripting interface so you can throw some scripts at it. And I know some of you guys out there are already thinking that. You'd love to throw a little Perl at this thing. Well, good news. Unity Sync lets you do it. No per user costs. Use our code TECH and get your first year of maintenance for free and a 30-day trial.
That reminds me of another. At the college, when I was working in the IT department, their Unix machine was based on this thing that would export Active Directory so they could create the Unix users with the usernames and passwords.
Right.
And it was limited to 1,000 users. And so it worked fine up until one semester there was more than 1,000 students and it broke.
Ran into that same kind of problem. And, with this kind of system, you can actually achieve that mythical global address list by synchronizing your multiple directories unidirectionally or one way for data protection. You could also use it for backup. Right? You could go grab from your master directory and use Unity Sync to do a one-way synchronization to a backup directory. There's a lot of possibilities here. It's going to solve a lot of problems for you guys. Go to durwiz.com, click on download, choose Unity Sync, put in the code TECH, and try it out. You guys are really going to love it. And thanks to Directory Wizards and Unity Sync for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. And in fact, Durwiz is in the chat room right now, the creator of Unity Sync, and he's in there answering questions for our live audience. Now that's awesome. That's a tech sponsor, right?
Exactly.
And I'm gonna play around with it. In fact, one of the things that's really cool about it is, just a little aside, is not only is it very powerful, but it has a very easy to use web interface as well. So you don't have to worry about kind of getting in over your head. You can go in there and you guys can just try it out and see if it's going to do what you want for 30 days. Love it. Now, Alan, we have epic amounts of feedback coming up.
We do.
Epic amounts of feedback. So is there anything else you want to cover in the news segment before we move into that?
Nope.
All right, then, sir. That means it's time for the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to TechSNAP at jupiterbroadcasting.com or submitting a link to our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv or popping that contact form at the top of our website. Mr. Jude, we have so many emails today, it's sort of blowing my mind.
Yes.
Our first one's a big one, too. It's from Mike. Are you ready?
Yep.
He says, Alan and Chris, hello from Ottawa. Been listening for a year. Especially appreciate the proper pronunciation of Zed by Alan.
Yes.
I'm going to complete my 2-year diploma in computer systems technician this fall. I'm planning on taking A+, CCNA, and maybe a Linux Plus or similar as well. I need some direction moving forward. I would love to work as a managed service provider working on Linux or BSD systems. Where do I go from my current state to my goal? My program covered computer server hardware, Linux admin, Windows admin, networking, and some touchy-feely classes to make us more social. In my spare time, I read a plethora of tech news and browse forums. I have a small home lab, which I installed guest OSs under ESXi and KVM, and fool around with networking, DCs, email, etc. Puppet is on my list to get into next, and I want to try my hand at it. Bad joke, I know. Moving on. And how do I go about getting my dream job? I'm hoping to do not to do any more full-time courses and would be happier taking courses certs part-time while I'm working. I love learning new stuff. This is due to having a previous career in the Army. He says, I'm going to get married and own a house. I want to start working at my career. Thanks so much, Mike. So the question is, Alan, where does he begin to start out as a managed service provider? Like, what's his next steps, do you think?
It's hard to say. Generally, if you have the lab like that, is just set a goal. I'm going to set up this, or make it do this, or make these two things work together, and then work at it. As far as other things, it's like, again, you have to basically look at what the job you want requires you to be able to do these things, and then learn how to do them.
Yeah, and I would say, so the managed service provider business, like a lot of this stuff, is reputation-based in a lot of ways. And it is kind of hard to get in at the ground level, but you kind of need to, it's all, if you have time, it's best to kind of get in and sort of volunteer a little bit and get in good.
Yep.
That's really the way you generally start. You could also try going off on your own and sort of creating your own business.
Right. Although, with the reputation-based thing, it's sometimes easier to get in with a firm that...
So this business, it's going through some changes right now, and he's going at the level where he's targeting somebody who could administer VMs. He's going to be somebody who knows how to use Puppet and deploy machines, right? So he's going in at a level that is probably the best level to go in. That's not going to be commoditized either by automation or by foreign workers. I mean, it's a good position to be in, but the problem is it's sort of the position you get after 10 years in the industry working all the way up. It's not usually one you just kind of walk in at.
Right. But it can be.
It can be, yeah.
Startups are a good place to look.
Yes.
They're always looking for people that know how to do the cloud stuff, which is all virtualization based and so on. But smaller places that, they need someone that knows the stuff, but they can't afford someone who has 10 years experience.
That's a great way to kind of get a lot of rapid exposure. And then, it's not always bad to go work at a big company for a while, too, and sort of see large scale
and also big companies oftentimes will pay for all those certs for you, like pay for you to get all those certs or reimburse you if you do get them or things like that.
Yeah.
That's the advantage with a bigger company than a smaller one.
It could be a way, too, to get in the ground floor and kind of have them pay your way.
Yep, exactly.
Chris G,
but
UK.
Generally, I guess you have to pick out what you want to learn and then figure out how to do it.
Chris G, UK in the chat room is saying, as a longtime sysadmin, he needs entry level. I spent patching panels for a year to get on the ladder. Oh my gosh. Being the patch panel monkey can be rough. Mike, so there you go. A couple options. So one option is the startup route because they're a little more accepting of lower experience levels.
They're really desperate for people that know the virtualization stuff.
But you're not going to make a lifelong career
there.
You're not going to make a career there, right? So use that to resume build, to get rapid exposure, to get you in the door to a company that'll probably pay your way to certifications. And then also at the same time, you're gaining that experience. Hopefully that works for you, Mike. All right, Alan, we got another email. It's coming from Kerry this week, and he says, Chris and Alan, thanks for the show. I had a question about securing a home web server that I want to create temporarily for a small project website I'm working on so I can test it from different devices and be able to access it from outside my main work machine. I have read that there's a lot of dangers in doing this, so one solution I came up with was to purchase a second router, have the main line go into a router, and off of that switch would be the web server, and then on another port on that switch would be the router for my home network. As I understand it, the web server becomes compromised. It will not allow traffic to then get into my home network. My other question is, after I purchase a domain from GoDaddy, how do I get that domain to serve up pages for my personal server and not the ones GoDaddy uses? So 2 questions there.
Okay. The first one, if you have your main router and then you create what is technically called a DMZ, or DMZ is a demilitarized zone. It's basically...
No.
Right. The actual definition of a demilitarized zone is like this line between 2 countries where neither of them goes in and it keeps the 2 from fighting with each other. It kind of works the same way in a network. It creates this gap where, these machines have access to your internet connection, but not to the rest of your network, right? So you have your router that has your internet connection, and it connects to your web server, and then to a second router, and all your home machines are behind it.
Right.
So connections coming from the web server to your home machines are treated as if they were coming from the internet, and so they're not trusted. The problem with that setup is that going out from your home machine, you're going to go through NAT twice, which slows it down a little bit and means if you do port forwarding, you have to do it twice, once on each router. So generally not recommended, but it's doable. Or you can do static routing between the 2 routers, but then you have to worry about the web machine being able to get in anyway.
Very good. And
then the second question? Sorry, you had a point first.
Well, I mean, he's going to kind of have a double NAT problem, but...
Right. But double NAT's not killer as long as you port forward both. Or what you can do to help kind of alleviate the double NAT problem is if the first router has a... actually, they call it a DMZ setting, where basically all incoming traffic that would normally be blocked will be forwarded to this other IP address. And basically, it's a blanket port forward on every port.
Yeah.
If you set that to the second router, then you'll have less problems with double NAT. You'll still be double NATed, but it resolves a lot of the issues.
This is an area where pfSense kind of has this solved for you because pfSense lets you do it all in one box.
Yeah, pfSense, you can just create a VLAN.
Yeah. And if you want something even easier, Untangle. We have a link in the last show notes where you can download a free ISO of that. Now, his second question is probably just because he's never tried it, and as soon as he tries it, he'll know how to do it. He says, once I get a domain from GoDaddy, how do I point it to my web server? Right. So for that, basically, you can use GoDaddy's DNS servers, and you just would create an A record and point it to your IP address, or a CNAME to like a dynamic DNS setup. And they have a UI to do that. So they'll have a little panel you go into, you'll put the IP address in there, they'll make it all super easy for you. So don't worry about it. All right, Alan, next email comes from Boston. It says, hello, long-time listener, love the show. How can I or someone test to make sure that files are really encrypted before I send them to the cloud? In services like Carbonite.com or LastPass, or any service that says files are encrypted offline and then they're uploaded, how do I actually verify that? Thanks for the answer. Keep up the good work. He says, also be sure you have a plan if your hard drive's... this is a note from me. All right, so he's asking how to verify his files have been encrypted before he uploads them. Any thoughts on that, Alan?
Well, you can look at the traffic as it goes across the network, although if they're doing it over SSL, you can't see inside. Generally, that's the problem with any closed source solution, is you can't tell, A, if it's being encrypted properly, but also B, if they're also encrypting it to their key as well. Right? When you encrypt, you can put 2 keys in, your key and their master key, and then with their master key, they can open everything.
Right.
So that's why you have to use a verifiably secure service, like there's... TechSNAP, but also Colin just tweeted the other day that he's welcomed a new competitor called S4, which is built on top of Amazon S3, but does client-side encryption. And again, because the client is open source, you can go through the code and see that, yes, my stuff is definitely going to be encrypted with my key and no one else's key before it gets sent.
That is really kind of your best bet. Now, in some cases...
in the chat room, they say if you encrypt it yourself with TrueCrypt or something before you send it, then you know.
Yep. That's a good point, too.
But yeah, generally, you either decide to trust their claim that it's encrypted or you decide not to trust it.
Now, in some cases, like I think LastPass, they hired third-party security experts to come in and look at it, verify that was happening. I don't know if that's true with Carbonite. So in some cases, you have that, but then you have to trust those people.
Yeah, but then everybody who deals with credit cards at least, I think, $500,000 a year or whatever, has to have a PCI audit, and we find problems with those all the time, where the audit said they were fine.
Really, the best bet is to encrypt it yourself with something like TrueCrypt. You just got to be sure that you have access to those files forever, because you might go years where you don't need to decrypt them.
So you have to make sure you keep the key.
Yeah.
Don't forget the password.
Jane writes in with questions about backing up a live VM. Hi. As many have talked about, I want to thank you for your show. And since they have, I should too. I run a small company in Finland, and we have a little self-made Hyper-V cluster of servers where we are serving different kind of services to our Finnish customers. We are building services like web servers, email servers, Exchange, DNS, and a variety of custom Windows and Linux servers. I've been watching TechSNAP from the beginning of the show and have gotten many good tips to secure and our development further secure our cluster infrastructure, which we call the mini matrix. After your recommendations, I have now a powerful firewall running made out of pfSense, actually two, as a matter of fact, and I've implemented lots of little improvements according to your tips along the way. That's cool. He says you've even also bought some SSL certs using our codes from GoDaddy and saved money on the way. So, big thank you to Alan and Chris. Keep up the good work. Now, here's this question. I have a question which he believes our experiences will have prepared us to answer. He says, I've developed some good practices. As I've said, we're doing some of our own services with Linux and Ubuntu CentOS, but I have not yet found a good way to keep our live Linux servers up to date without shutting them down and backing up the virtual machine hard drives for my own sake after shutting everything down. I really could use some tips on how to keep Linux up to date, but keep it backed up. Can I trust Yum and apt-get, and does there... Oh, I see where he's going. And does the work... I'm sorry, it's a different language. There's a little language issue. Does there work and update installed services without breaking the services or messing my configurations? And how do I revert back? So he's basically got questions about doing updates and backup.
Well, basically, if he does the updates, he can't trust it's not going to break it, so he needs a backup, but he doesn't want to shut down.
But then he has to take them down to back them up.
Right. So if the file system where the VM image is living can be snapshotted, then you would have a consistent moment in time where everything on the drive is exactly how it was at that 1 second, right? Basically, the problem with a normal backup is you're backing up this, say, 25 gigabyte virtual machine image. If you write to a file in the middle of the backup, then all of a sudden, if you write two files at the same time in the middle of the backup, all of a sudden those two files are from different dates in the backup. One was taken before it was updated, and the other after it was updated, right? So to get a consistent backup, you have to basically back up the entire thing in less than 1 second. And so that's where a snapshot comes in. It lets you freeze a copy of the image and let the machine keep running, and then you back up that copy of what that entire system looked like at that one fraction of a second.
Right. Snapshots are definitely...
Yeah. No. If you can't do the snapshot from outside the VM...
Right.
Because so if your VM was on top of ZFS, you could just snapshot it and do that. Or I know VMware has a feature for it. I'm sure that Hyper-V would have a feature for this.
Oh, yeah,
maybe
it does.
Not.
Yeah, it does. No, it does. But in fact, I don't even think it pauses the machine.
Right, some of them pause the machine.
Yeah, like VirtualBox.
Some of them pause the machine for long enough to take the snapshot and then resume it.
Yeah.
Which is usually only a couple of minutes or seconds or whatever. But
and the other thing too, and I don't think it's in the version of CentOS he's using, but package managers like Yum actually have integrated with ButterFS and will execute. You can actually have Yum execute a file system snapshot before it executes any package management operations. And then if there's any issues, you can actually use Yum to roll back to your state you were before you did the update. So that's just a file system level thing inside the VM. You could do that too.
Right. So if you can't do it at the file system level outside of the VM to take the whole VM image at once, your other option is to back up inside the VM and do a snapshot of the file system inside.
I guess I don't quite follow. I mean, it seems like what I'm missing here is why he's not using just a Hyper-V snapshot. I guess is the part that I'm missing, because that would
maybe he doesn't know about it. I don't know how it works or how to use it. But I've never used Hyper-V.
Maybe they're not running in the Hyper-V. Maybe some of these machines aren't running in the Hyper-V. That could be it too.
I don't know. But
yeah.
Is there a place you would look to get instructions on how to do backups with snapshots in Hyper-V?
Oh, I'm sure on Microsoft's TechNet site. But I was just thinking too, outside of that, his other options would be like maybe really he should be managing this through Puppet. What do you think? If he's got a few machines, he needs to do central configuration management. He wants to be able to revert and push back configuration. Maybe this is more of a job for Puppet.
Right. Yep. Possibly. And then one way to deal with this problem of having to take machines offline is instead of having to try to figure out some way to have a backup of this machine, is to have two machines, right? Especially if your virtualization software has snapshots, you can also do what's called a clone, right? Where you take a snapshot and then boot that up as a second machine. So what you can do is basically clone the machine and then upgrade the clone that you're not using. So the original machine keeps running after you snapshot it, and then you clone that and you upgrade the clone and make sure everything works. And only if that clone worked, then you swap that clone into place and throw away the old one, or keep it for a while and then throw it away.
Yeah. That's a good way to do dev testing too, or just run some test upgrades there first.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, well, we got to help out Aaron because Aaron's having a very bad day. He writes in, he says, initially I started playing around with ZFS on Linux about a year ago after hearing about it on the show. I love it. It's been extremely stable on my home system, which I use for backup, media for my XBMC, family photos and videos, etc. A few months ago, I suggested to my boss that we evaluate FreeNAS for our clients. It's been terrible. We've built 5 FreeNAS boxes for testing using various hardware. All are 64-bit systems ranging in memory from 4 gigabytes to 32 gigabytes. They all hold between 4 and 10 hard drives. The motherboards are Intel or Supermicro with Intel NICs. They crash constantly, with KMEM mapped to small errors. By constantly, I mean the longest running NAS gets about 1.5 weeks of uptime. I've tried running FreeNAS 8 and the new 9
Is
RC.
he running the 32-bit version of FreeNAS on 64-bit hardware? Because that's the only way you would get a KMEM error like that.
Well, maybe. Because, he pointed out it's 64-bit hardware. You'd think.
But he might, if he put a 32-bit version of FreeNAS on it, you'll have that problem because it can't. ZFS on 32-bit doesn't work very well.
I said I've tried turning auto-tune on and off, made things worse after I disabled it. I've run hardware tests, verified the images we burned to CD. Finally, we purchased NAS directly from IX Systems. Has been running like a champ. Looking at the NAS box from IX Systems and my various text boxes, I see no difference in the config. I'm knowledgeable Linux admin, but I'm not too comfortable with FreeBSD yet. Am I missing something? Come on, Alan. I thought FreeBSD was supposed to be stable.
It is. And yeah, that KMEM error is specifically means that basically when you're using a 32-bit OS, you only have this, you can only deal with numbers up to 4 billion, right? And so you have this memory area of up to 4 billion and you're using it and stuff. And basically the kernel needs a bunch of extra space that it actually normally allocates off the end of that. And on 64-bit, you have tons of room and you can have all this extra space. But yeah, the KMEM map too small error is definitely makes me suspect that he was running the 32-bit version instead of the 64-bit version.
That'd be a pretty big oopsie if they've built 5 of them, right? And put 32
well, if they
gigs of RAM.
downloaded the disk once and burn it once, then it's going to be the same disk for all 5 machines, right?
Yeah. Let's see. The only time my FreeNAS box has ever gone down, it didn't even, actually the box itself, the OS didn't go down, just the storage pool became unavailable because I had hard drives die. But even in that scenario, I could still get to the admin interface of the FreeNAS box and all of that. So I've never really experienced crashing. I am running on a FreeNAS Mini from IX Systems.
Mm-hmm.
So but I've run it on other hardware too. I've never had a problem. So I don't know. Aaron, good luck with that, man.
But yeah, it definitely sounds like he accidentally used the i286 version instead of the 64-bit version, and that's why.
Yeah. All right, Aaron, you got to follow up and let us know what happened there. Bolt writes in, I'm calling him Bolt because Lexi messed up on the formatting of his name. He says, hi, I've been listening to Chris's show since the early days of Linux Reality, thanks to Chase. I've started using Linux, and Last and Twit have been 2 podcasts that have been my most constant. Through the last years, TechSNAP is right there with the previous 2 shows. The question isn't considering Yahoo emails. I was one of those whose emails got hacked years ago. As a small kiddo, I used the same passwords in all the sites, and for security questions and answers, I just punched in random strings. With Yahoo hacked and the Twitter was gone, not to mention Flickr. With Yahoo hacked, the Twitter was gone, and so I guess all those accounts got compromised too. The one way to get your Twitter back is the reset email to my Yahoo Mail account, if I could ever manage to get back into that. The second question. Okay, so here's this question. What sort of box, ARM versus low-power x86, should I buy for a simple home server that would be used for Samba, DNS caching, static web server, backup, and maybe a few other things? Nothing should be too CPU intensive as far as I know. I want it to be quiet and low power. I could also ask Linux and BSD, but I don't want you two to get in a fight. So he's kind of asking, and I'm wondering, Alan, have you considered getting an ARM-based machine for home networking purposes?
Not really.
I mean, you'd have no fan. right? Right,
Well,
that'd be nice.
I have a giant 2-foot tall tower full of like 120 and 200 millimeter fans that are silent, and keep all my 6 hard drive array. All the drives are less than 30 Celsius, so they don't die like yours did because they were at like 65 Celsius.
Hey.
And
Damn it.
part of the reason why I went with the giant machine like that is I wanted to use it as more than just storage.
Yeah.
Right. I wanted to be able to run a bunch of VMs on it.
Yeah.
And so I put a big fat i5 in it with the 16 gigs of RAM instead of, cheaping out with something small, ARM, low power, or whatever.
Yeah.
The i5 does a decent job of not using more power when I don't need it because,
Yeah.
Most of the time it's completely idle. It shuts down the extra cores and
Right.
underclocks itself, and it saves quite a bit of power.
Yeah, I wouldn't go ARM. No, before I went ARM, I'd go Atom. And
Yeah, Atom is better, especially now that the newer Atoms can do 64-bit and you can have a little bit more RAM. Before, when you were limited to 4 gigs and 32-bit, it was kind of iffy.
And they're dual core.
I guess, are the new ones dual core? Like, I know the original ones,
is that
single core with hyper-threading.
Yeah.
So it looks like 2 cores, but it's not.
I think it might be what it still is. But not only are you going to then get x86 compatibility, which I think everybody underestimates until they're on a non-x86 CPU, and then you're like, oh, I wanted Plex, can't do Plex. Oh, I wanted BitTorrent sync, can't do BitTorrent sync. Oh, I wanted transmission, can't use transmission. Oh, I wanted SAB NZB, oh, I can't use SAB NZB. I mean, the list goes on and on. x86 compatibility is key. Not only that, but I will bet you any day of the week that a 1.2 gigahertz Atom processor is going to be faster than a 1.2 gigahertz ARM processor. And really, the Atom processors don't put out that much heat. And you could even step it up from there and still stay relatively cheap. Go Core 2 Duo.
I guess technically the Atom processors use more power than an ARM.
Yeah.
But an Atom processor uses 2 watts. An ARM uses maybe like 0.5.
Yeah.
You're not going to notice it may be 4 times more power.
I mean, you might notice in a mobile device, but you're not going to notice in a...
Yeah. Notice if you're running out of batteries, but you're not. So.
So don't do it, is what we're saying. Don't do it. There's your answer.
Yeah. So, ARM is great, but
ARM's taking over. I believe ARM will take over in a big way for a lot of jobs in the data center. And I think you're already seeing rack mount machines from HP that are going to have 20 ARM boxes in the 4U unit that goes into your rack, and that's going to be super powerful. And
and as they become more popular, they're also the software will get more of it will get ported so it runs on ARM.
Yeah.
But right now it's kind of early days, and I would avoid running different CPU architectures because while it's fun and cool, it's not very useful all the time.
All right.
Yes, and ARM 64-bit is still fairly new as well.
Next email comes in from Joel from Sweden. He says, "Hi, Chris and Alan. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the awesome show that makes it every week and makes sysadmin life a little more interesting. You've helped me more than you can imagine." Now, we had kind of like a directory deep dive section in the feedback where we just I call it directory drive, where we're going to get into some of the directory follow-up stuff. Last week we had an email about replacing Active Directory. This is why I'm glad Unity Sync's on the show, because there's a lot of directory questions we get. So,
because Michael sent in the one. He's like the small office, and they have a bunch of Windows clients, but they don't want to spend money on a Windows server.
Right. So here you go. He says, first of all, I already said that part. I'd like to give you some feedback for episode 120 about the need for central user management. Take a look at Zentyal.com, Zentyal. It's a Linux small business server. It's got an awesome web interface, and it works in combination with my FreeNAS box, and it makes for a great Soho setup. I'd also like to comment on the guy who asked about putting his FreeNAS box, router, and all of the other VMs on the same physical machine. At home, I have an Ubuntu server running KVM with a lot of VMs pumping traffic through a virtual pfSense box. The virtual machines run on zvols with the help of ZFS on Linux on the host machine. My storage dataset is shared with NFS over the virtual network so the VMs can have access to all the goodies. The setup is working great, but if you're going to use pfSense and KVM, make sure to run the latest beta so you can get VirtIO, which greatly helps with performance. This is not a setup I would run in production since you put all your eggs in the same basket, so to say. But for someone with a home setup and only one server, it's awesome. If you could take a look at GNUnet, in a future episode, that'd be great too. It really looks cool. Thanks, and take care for all the great content.
A production setup would have 2 pfSense boxes that are high availability, failover, load balanced, in front of two or more virtualization boxes that are running all the VMs, and you can fail over between them, and you can live migrate between them. And then in the back end, one or more FreeNAS boxes where you're storing all the data. But that's 5 or more machines, which is probably a little overkill for your house.
Yeah, exactly. Which it is.
You know,
and
not
now
everybody can build that in their basement.
I've got 2 machines upstairs. I've got 2 machines in here. I mean, I've got servers everywhere in this house now. It's getting ridiculous.
I have that, and but being able to build it in virtualization does work. I just wouldn't recommend that for production. But for your home lab, it works perfectly fine.
All right, another question.
And yes, VirtIO stuff is nice. Basically, the idea with VirtIO and VirtNet and so on is that rather than the way it was done traditionally is the network card in your virtual machine emulated a really old network card that every operating system supported.
Right.
And so, originally nobody was trying to get performance out of their virtual machine. So the fact that it was a 10 megabit card didn't hurt, or a 100 megabit card didn't hurt. But now people are trying to put gigabit or more out of these virtual machines. So rather than, most of them emulate the Intel Pro 1000 now. But rather than doing that, which, requires the driver to run in the virtual machine and so on, with VirtNet, it's basically just have the operating system in virtualization, send the stuff directly through this really, really light driver that just directs it straight through the VM into the machine. And it's, one step away from actually passing the NIC into the virtual machine. And it works much better. And then so VirtIO does it for the hard drives. So instead of emulating an old IDE controller or a SATA controller, you're just saying, here's a block device, just use it. Don't bother with, anything fancy. Don't bother emulating hardware. Just run the block device straight through.
Mm-hmm.
And so VirtIO and VirtNet are very cool. And that's the FreeBSD hypervisor, Beehive. It's called legacy free because it purposely doesn't have you don't have an option except VirtIO. It's never going to emulate an old network card or an old IDE controller because they don't want to bother with the giant piles of ugly code that would require.
And speaking of hypervisor, this is one of the things that Microsoft rolled out in Windows 2008 is this hypervised hardware where the guest is aware that it's communicating with a hypervisor, and so the drivers are optimized for that. It's not trying to emulate the whole hardware stack.
It's the same thing as VirtIO and VirtNet.
Right. And I got to tell you, I came from the full-on hardware emulation world when Windows 2008 landed, and I was just experimenting with it. I was blown away by the performance difference. Just loading software, I could tell that a hypervisor was much faster than a full-on virtualization. So I totally see what you're saying. So it's good to know.
Yeah,
it's good stuff.
If you're writing to a hard drive, if the virtualizer has to waste CPU cycles and time and memory and stuff, running a fake IDE controller.
Yeah.
First of all, it's an IDE controller. It's going to be slow. And second of all, you're wasting that time where you could just be saying, give me the blocks and I'll write them to the disk.
Right. Yeah, it's silly now when you think about it. All right, I love this next question because it involves LDAP, Samba 4, a Raspberry Pi, and Windows clients. Here we go. Hello, Chris.
This sounds exactly like what Michael was asking us for.
I'm wondering. I have implemented Samba 4 in production, and it's quite stable. We have 3 servers. This is following up on some questions we had last week. We have 3 servers, 2 in the office and 1 in the data center. All 3 replicate to each other. With that, I can authenticate Linux, Mac, and Windows machines, as well as any software that is compatible with LDAP authentication, such as OpenVN, MediaWiki, Jaria, etc. The administration can be done via command line, but it's easier if you have the admin tools installed on a Windows box in a VM or something. You can also use Zentel. So here's another plug for Zentel, second email. That looks like a small business server, but I've never actually used it. I think the only software that couldn't integrate was MySQL, which I'll revisit soon and try to plug in with a plugin written by Perconia. And I've heard of them before. And I know that they do actually some of that integration. He said also, you can probably have Samba 4 working on a Raspberry Pi, but that 512 megs of RAM might not be enough. Thanks, and keep up the great work, Soraya. So I love the concept, and honestly, it does sound maybe like you got to wait till the next generation of Raspberry Pi device. But the idea...
there's other non-Raspberry Pi-based ARM devices that are a little higher end.
But think about just this tiny little machine acting as a Windows domain controller with LDAP on there and Samba 4. I mean, that's a beautiful thing, Alan.
Well, I remember this other ridiculous setup we had for one of our clients. They only wanted to pay for 1 Windows Server license.
Okay.
Right? So they had their Windows server running their web server and their Active Directory co-located with us.
Yeah, okay.
And then they had a pfSense box at their office and the domain controller would VPN into the pfSense box, and that's how the machines at the office would log in to their domain controller that's actually in our data center.
Oh, sure. Yep. I've done that too, actually. I've done that too. And then, of course, the internet connection goes down and people's machines take
Can't
a boot.
log in.
Yeah. But, as long as the
that was
internet
the
connection.
DSL provider's fault, not our fault.
Yep. I've also done one of these days, I'll have to tell the stories about when we went through a period of time where we decided we could take everybody's home or everybody's small office and move it into our data center with terminal services. And we were told we sold everybody that would buy it on completely virtualizing their office. And then, of course, DSL goes up for the whole building. We had like 3 or 4 clients in one building, and they all just totally ganged up on us.
Yeah. And also, just probably a little slower, but not too bad.
Back in the day. Yeah, it was early days. I had a question that sparked my interest. I don't know, Alan, you might want to chime in, but I thought maybe we'd open the floor, too, to the audience to follow up on. This one came in from Techie Cluster in our subreddit. He says, "Hey, Chris and Alan and everyone else, recently I bought a new computer for testing, but I didn't have a second mouse, keyboard, or monitor. So my question is, what graphical remote desktop software like TeamViewer that's free or open source and secure and cross-platform do you recommend? Keep up the awesome show, Techie Cluster." This is a great question. Cross-platform is key. Secure is key, because you could always answer VNC, but that's not really secure. You could answer...
well, newer VNC over SSL isn't so bad.
Right. Its performance still balls.
It's more setup, but yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't have that bad problems with Type VNC.
Right. Or, So
the main reason I use Type VNC instead of remote desktop, like the standard Windows one on my Windows machine, was that if I did remote desktop, it would log me out at the actual terminal where I was sitting. Right? Like if I remote desktop into my Windows machine remotely, when I come back home, my machine's at the login screen, and that kind of drove me nuts.
And X server is another good pick. So I'd be curious if people want to send in their thoughts to TechSNAP at jupiterbroadcasting.com, or pop that contact link, or start a thread in our subreddit. Actually, I'll have this thread linked in the show notes. If you just want to click here and throw your thoughts in that thread, that'd be the perfect spot for it. Especially since we're going to be off next week. Well, we'll have a show, but we won't be recording one. All right, Alan. Well, that's it for the feedback this week. We powered through it. We did good. We got way more next episode too. Much more feedback.
The Skype ad that came up during that.
What?
It's for SiriusXM's Next Top Comic.
Yeah.
And it just shows like this lady in jeans, and then she pees herself in the shape of a heart, and it's like We Heart Comedy. I'm like, what?
Is it animated too?
Yeah.
You have an animated ad of a woman peeing herself on your Skype right now?
Yes.
Microsoft's getting so classy.
Well, it's SiriusXM, right? It's the same commercial is probably running on TV somewhere. But now I have to pee.
Hey, remember how Skype is awesome?
Yeah.
Jeez. All right, Alan.
Well, the ad before that was targeted at me, though.
Oh, yeah? What was it?
The ad before that was from a place renting dedicated servers.
That's a little creepy. A little creepy, actually.
Well, I'm sure that it's somehow related to... That's all the ads I see on Google and YouTube anymore, either.
You should get a screenshot of the peeing lady.
The animation stopped. It's just telling me to vote now. But it was... I was watching these... Remy Girard, he's this French guy that like dresses up as Mario and drives a go-kart around Paris throwing banana peels in front of cars and stuff.
Okay.
He's a prankster. He does all these different pranks. Anyway, it's in French, but you're watching a guy prank people. He doesn't really talk.
Yeah.
But anyway, now for like a week after that, all my YouTube ads were in French.
How do they know?
Which is twice as annoying. Well, they knew the video I was watching in French, so they assumed
they're not Google though.
But no, sorry, my videos I watched on YouTube, and then my YouTube ads were in French.
Okay. I thought you were on Skype.
Yes. Sorry, no.
Okay. That's creepy.
These are like the pre-roll ads where they're actually like talking in French. It's like, I don't understand you. Please go away.
They're like, maybe they detected you had a Canadian IP and they thought, there's a shot.
Mostly they looked at the fact that I was
looking at
watching French videos.
All right, very good, Mr. Jude. Well, now that you've seen your peen ad, I guess we could wrap up the feedback segment, right?
Well, I have to.
Yeah, go. Right, okay. All right, well, that brings us to the TechSNAP Roundup. Thanks, everybody, for sending your emails. Emails TechSNAP at jupiterbroadcasting.com. We'll answer them in a future episode of the TechSNAP program. But, Alan, it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. Welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the Roundup are stories that didn't quite fit at the top of the show, but we still want to talk about them, give you some links to follow up on your own after the show. And a lot of these links were provided by our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. All right, Alan, this next story, our first Roundup story, just makes me shake my head. It's interesting. It came out yesterday. Glenn Greenwald over at The Guardian posted a story about KeyScore, the NSA tool that collects nearly everything a user does on the internet. Did you get a chance to look at this?
Well, yeah, so this KeyScore is basically the program that allowed analysts to search these giant databases of emails, online chats, browsing histories, and so on. Although apparently there's only a couple million people in this database, so these are people they flagged to watch.
Right.
And this is everybody's stuff.
This is as of 2008.
Ah.
So it could be different now.
Yeah.
One of the things that came out in this leak is they have a slide where they show all of the locations that the NSA has monitoring at providers. Because this is where they're actually connecting in at the provider level. And this, again, is from 2008. But it's pretty in-depth coverage, especially outside the U.S. It's extremely in-depth. And one of the things they talk about is the system, the most fascinating component of this system is these locations. Each location has a Linux server that stores 3 days of everything. Every packet is stored for 3 days. And then they have a series, this part of this KeyScore system, the keyword there is score. The KeyScore system analyzes this 3-day buffer and extracts the metadata into the various databases. And then the other end of this KeyScore system is essentially the operator front end, where all they have to do is they can say, and they list all this out in this presentation, show me all of the VPN activity in this country initiated between these date ranges that contacted these web services. Or you can go something like, show me everyone in Iran who connected to Gmail and had a Word doc attached to their email. Or show me all the people who posted to Twitter between this time range with these operating systems. And they also will collect any kind of machine identifiable cookies that they discover along the way. They will watch who you send emails to and from. All of that gets extracted using this KeyScore system, and then it's available for analysts. And now the damning part, the part that is really offensive as an American citizen, because there's this little thing called the Constitution, is there's actually no technical limitation that prevents any contractor, any NSA representative that has access to the system for searching for anything they want. There are workplace policies in place that say you shouldn't do X, but like everybody knows who works somewhere at a workplace, there's lots of policies that nobody follows. And you can search, all you need is an IP, a name, an email address, a phone number, any kind of identifiable information like that, and you can do a search on all of the internet traffic.
Yep.
There you go. KeyScore.
Yeah, and here where they're showing, all searches on the bbc.co.uk where someone searched for the term Musharraf.
Right. You can, yeah, okay. Oh, yeah. So they can, everything you search for on Google, BBC, CNN, they're watching all of
if you searched Google over SSL, it probably didn't pick it up.
Right.
But
now, of course, when this presentation was made, it probably did back then.
Right, yeah, back then you couldn't do a search over SSL, so.
Yeah. We covered this.
You can tell it's a little old because MySpace is on the list of places they watch.
Yeah. And also in the presentation, like some of the words have the misspell underlined still. It's funny. We covered this extensively last night in Unfilter 61. We spent about 20, 30 minutes talking about this. You can go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com, watch Unfilter 61 in NSA We Trust. Also, on top of that, there was some additional hearings and some additional leaks as well. So we kicked all that around last night. Crazy stuff, Alan. And that slide just alone, to look where they have all of the NSA installations, is spooky in itself.
What's with the weird straight series of dots along Antarctica?
Maybe satellites?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I was wondering the same thing. I don't think there's a lot of, maybe there's a lot of internet connections there. I don't think so.
I don't think so.
All right, this next story sort of fits. Boy, I hope you still have your tinfoil hats on, folks. Feds tell web firms to turn over user accounts and passwords. This is according to CNET. Over CNET's news site, secret demands mark an escalation in internet service provider surveillance by the federal government through gaining access to user passwords. Now, they go on to say the U.S. government has demanded that major internet companies divulge users' stored passwords, according to 2 industry sources familiar with these orders, which represent an escalation in surveillance techniques not previously disclosed. Now, how useful this is? Who knows, right? If you have an encrypted database, I don't know, maybe you can crack it.
Well, if it's encrypted, that means you have a key to decrypt it, and then you would have to give them the plain text.
Yeah.
If it's a hash password, then apparently they want to know the algorithm, the salt, and the hash, and they'll go and use a GPU cluster to try to hack it. And that's why you use bcrypt. Or actually, I was following a conversation on Twitter with Colin Percival, and he was saying, scrypt is designed to defeat the enemy who can use a chip fab and make a bunch of ASICs, right? To be able to crack the passwords faster. So with scrypt, instead of being like all other hashing algorithms where they keep trying to use more and more CPU time, since you can pound out all these very specially designed processors that will do it really fast, like the ASICs do for Bitcoin, his scrypt is based on making you use a lot of memory, which they would, it's a lot harder to build. You can't distribute that as easily, right?
Right.
You can't spread the RAM across machines in order to crack one password. So yeah, scrypt uses the time memory trade-off. So instead of making you take a lot of time, it makes you take a lot of memory. And so it was kind of specifically designed to protect you against hacking by someone who can, use a million computers if they need to crack your password.
scrypt is about to meet its biggest challenge because it's the math behind Litecoin, which is the second most popular cryptocurrency. And there's already the same race that happened with Bitcoin to accelerate that. So now they've gotten scrypt really rocking on GPUs. When Litecoin first came onto the scene, it was really a CPU-only math because of the memory requirements. And now it's being handsomely calculated on GPUs. I've been doing some Litecoin mining. So you got to wonder if this cryptocurrency isn't going to push some of this stuff to its limits. Because there's people out there that they want to push it.
Partly that will be the design of Litecoin, whether they designed it to require an amount of memory that a GPU can't really do. But a lot of GPUs now have almost as much RAM as a lot of computers.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of them come with 2 or 4 gigs of memory.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. GPUs today, I mean, my Bonobo laptop, I think has 4 gigs of video memory. It's crazy.
Yep. And a lot of onboard video cards can actually share the memory from the system.
Yeah.
And where normally for Bitcoin that wouldn't work because they don't have the CPU power, but scrypt doesn't require all that much CPU power.
Right.
So, yeah, if you could accelerate scrypt so it's faster on the video card than on the processor, but give it access to all the system RAM, you might be able to do something kind of cool.
So you Canadians are having some mobile troubles, huh? Tell me about this story.
Not really. This is... the existing mobile companies, Bell, Rogers, and Telus, are trying to prevent the government from opening up the mobile market to allow foreign companies to come in.
Yeah.
Currently, laws prevent, partly for national security reasons, but partly just for protectionism, companies that deal with mobile phones or anything like that have to be at least 51% Canadian.
Yeah,
so
I totally actually get this. Would you want Verizon up in Canada? I mean, my God. It's a cancer that's already infected all of the United States.
If it would cause... Yeah, but
you want
think
more
it's
speeds?
bad there. We have even worse time here. Like the rates you can buy unlimited mobile data in the U.S. It's not possible to buy that in Canada. Nobody sells it.
Yeah.
Right? So we kind of need the competition. These 3 guys are ingrained and open up. It'd be really nice to have Ting, but Ting's a Sprint reseller, and so
no Ting and no Sprint up there.
Yeah, and
what we really need, and this is so
if they were trying to resell one of the ones that were here, it would be horrible because the ones that are here are horrible.
Yeah, it's too bad.
That was horrible.
Yeah, that's definitely not the way of the future. You need to get good mobile. I wish we lived in an age of mesh networking where devices were secure and then technology was mature enough that it was low power and widespread enough that I just wish all of these disparate devices could all be part of a larger network, and we wouldn't have to have Verizon or AT&T or any of that. The devices themselves would provide the connectivity. It's probably a security nightmare, never going to happen, but I wish it was the way of the future. All right, let's talk about Google giving AT&T the boot at Starbucks. I'm excited. This is U.S. only, but Starbucks locations with Wi-Fi your Wi-Fi will now be provided by Google, which is kind of cool. I prefer Google over AT&T. Here's the pitch. You ready for this? When your local Starbucks Wi-Fi connection goes Google, you'll be able to surf the web at speeds up to 10 times faster than before. If you're a Google Fiber City, we're hoping to get your connection up to 100 times faster. Google Fiber in the Starbucks, though. That's awesome, right? Come on.
Yes, although it makes it... Well, apparently the AT&T was really slow. But, it was rolled out many years ago. But it sounds like, if you had like a 5 megabit connection share between the 40 people that were in a Starbucks, it would obviously suck.
Yeah. 7,000 U.S. locations will be up and running within the next 18 months, powered by Google. You'll know the new network is ready to go when you log in. It says Google Starbucks.
Connecting it. Like,
yeah.
Wouldn't you be really, really ticked off if you lived next door to a Starbucks and Google wouldn't let you have that internet at your, Google Fiber internet at your house when they ran the cables to the Starbucks next door?
I wonder if some locations, if they're not just reselling people's... Yeah, I don't know.
Possibly. But maybe Google has the money. They could just pay for subscriber line, pay the utility company to run a piece of fiber to that address.
I have a plea to make to the audience.
It only costs $1,000 a month or something.
If you have a Starbucks and you get fiber connection, run that into here. And then here's another question. Here's a second plea, unrelated, not associated with the first plea. If you figure out how to hack an $80 million yacht, don't tell anybody. Just contact your buddies, Alan and Chris, and let us go out for a little cruise. We'll do an episode of TechSNAP on the yacht. Alan, did you see this story here? It's a college student who hijacked the $80 million yacht with the GPS signal spoofing.
Well, they did it. It was a controlled experiment. But
yeah, I know. I wanted to do it for real and then drive it to Washington and then just, we don't have to keep it. We won't keep it. We'll give it back.
The crew is on the yacht at the time, right? The yacht isn't really driving itself.
Well, I need a crew.
Using the autopilot.
I can't take care of an $80 million yacht myself. I need the crew. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, well, they might try to repel you if you try to board.
Good point.
Muskets or something.
Yeah. Maybe if I bring him some beer.
Yeah. Basically, the student was on like a small launch boat off near the ship, and basically from his laptop was sending a GPS signal that was stronger than the actual satellite signals, and was saying the position was off just slightly. And basically, they managed to convince the guidance system on the yacht that it had gotten 3 degrees off course. So they made a correction to get back on course, which is actually causing them to go 3 degrees off course, right? Because they had been on course. And so just by slowly giving it this nudge and introducing an error over and over, they could basically tell the ship to go somewhere else.
So over time, they corrected it, and it ended up at the completely wrong spot. Through a series of little micro corrections as it's trying to get back on the right. So the boat thinks the whole time it's getting back on course. I'm fixing the problem.
Right,
the boat thinks.
Exactly. Because it's trusting the GPS and the GPS is wrong. At some point to solve that, you might have to go, some kind of signed GPS.
I'm just saying, I don't live that far from a water inlet, and if a boat showed up and I got a text message or a tweet, I could just show up, no questions asked, take that boat out for a ride. That's all I'm saying. All right, Alan. Our next roundup story comes out of Russia.
The worrying part here could be doing it for pirates, right? If pirates had this, they could make a ship go to the wrong place where they could then hijack it or something.
Does this seem like one of those things that like the U.S. military probably figured out back when GPS was introduced and maybe has even used it?
Well, they did GPS jamming so that you wouldn't have GPS at all, and then you just then
you're screwed. Then what are you going to do? Drive it yourself? That's crazy. Pull out the sextant? I don't think so, Alan. All right, Russia proposes banning foul language on the internet. Well, this almost seems like a slam dunk to me.
Yeah.
You can see we got porn, we got Cameron's porn filter going in, and you got Russia that wants to ban swear words.
I think the best part was the name of the law in Russia.
What is it?
The law was named On the Protection of Children from Information Harmful to Their Health and Development.
Oh my gosh, you're right.
That's kind of a translation, but that's literally what the law is called.
The name of this new law, On Protection of Children from Information Harmful to Their Health and Development. Yep, save the children, Alan.
It's literally, think of the children is the name of the law.
Well, I'm glad to see that works
everywhere. And they're trying to use that as a hedge for them to filter the internet for political reasons, nothing to do with the children.
They also have advised...
No matter how much they claim, politicians do not care about the children.
It might be hard to believe, but is actually true. They've also proposed to tighten control over social networks and allow people with dating sites, but only if they use their passport.
Yes.
You got to have a passport to use the dating site.
Yeah.
Gosh. We are going into some crazy arse times, Alan. That's all I can say. All right, well, that brings us to the end of this week's episode, doesn't it?
I just thought of something.
What?
It's a ridiculous look on my face. No, it'll be next episode.
All right. Yeah, that's right. We could get Those of you watching live, stay tuned because we've got even more show coming up. But those of you watching us on demand, don't worry. We'll have a TechSNAP out next week at our regular Thursday evening releases. Heck, maybe even a little early on Thursday. If you want to join us live, you can do so in 2 weeks. We're live on Thursdays at 1 p.m. Pacific, which is
4 p.m. Eastern, 2000 UTC.
Howskis. Don't forget we want your emails, techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com, or hit that contact link at the top of the website. Alan, you have yourself a great couple of minutes. I'll see you in about 30 seconds, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of TechSNAP. We'll see you right back here next week.